Wordslut by Amanda Montell. Before we start, because we have a lot of business to attend to here and I will forget otherwise, can we just appreciate for like 2 seconds how it looks like it says weed slat underneath the title on the cover? I mean, look at that. Seriously. All right, guys, this is easily the most feminist book I've reviewed ever. So bear with me if there's something I'm missing. I hoped that this book personally would sharpen my vocabulary regarding overall niche terminology. My most extreme experience with feminism, I will admit, full disclosure, probably the stupidest freaking thing I could do in a video like this, especially in the beginning, but just being honest here that in some point in time, I was a red pillar. Notwithstanding, my life has taken a ruthless and dramatic 180 since. I haven't looked at or into this philosophy in close to a decade, and the last time I did, I think I almost puked some blood in my mouth. But it's so crazy to me at one point that that's what I thought, and now I'm reviewing a book called Wordslut. So I've reviewed this critically acclaimed nonfiction author's wildly fascinating 2021 work called Cultish, about the language that cults use to reel and keep people in, and to say that there were some left-leaning undertones would be a left-leaning understatement. But I loved it. I loved it so much. I mean, the writing style, the personality, the unique subject matter, and all made for an extremely enjoyable listen. I only listen to audiobooks that just breezed right on by, and it earned easily a top 5 spot from that year. So what's this one about? Let's talk about it. Just so you guys know, there are affiliate links in the description. If you buy anything through those links, like maybe this book, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel and keep making these videos. You can also get them on my Amazon storefront, as well as the links to any reviews that I've done of other books that I've mentioned in this video, because this is not the only book I've ever reviewed in my life, okay? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam, and I want to make self-growth normal, because people shouldn't have to look this information up. It should just be mainstream knowledge. If you agree, then please make sure to smash that like button. According to Wikipedia, feminism is a range of socio-political movements and ideologies that aim to define and establish the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. It holds the position that societies prioritize the male point of view and that women are treated unjustly in these societies. What is Wordslut and how does it pertain to this? Chapter 0, a chapter that I don't remember the last time I've ever seen a chapter 0 in a book, so this was pretty fun. Meet sociolinguistics, what all the cool feminists are talking about. The author says this book is about the psychedelic universe that exists behind the English language. Isn't that such a cool way of looking at things? Every part of our speech tells other people about us. Interestingly, we live in a unique and turbulent time for language. I also found it interesting that men had so much more to do with the development of the English language than women. Like, disproportionately so. She went over the history of this. Also, when the author said that cutesy terms like mompreneur do the opposite of what they intend to, like empower, I can't stand the word entrepreneur as it is, but mompreneur, like, who are you helping? Like, actually empowering language? I mean, that's in the book. The yeses and nos are all in the book. Chapter 1, slutty, and nasty. A comprehensive list of gendered insults I hate, but also kind of love. Just so you guys know, these words, like, and like, these are literally the authors. These are literally the exact chapter names. These are not mine. Here we have a very extensive list of insults toward women. A lot of them you could just call words, but they're insults too, because many of them became more dehumanizing and even sexual over time, like the word mistress, which used to be the female version of master. Everyone knows what a master is, you know, the person in charge. What's a mistress now? Some feminine terms do ameliorate, but that's because women actively reclaim them, which I found interesting. I'm just waiting for Amanda Montell to put out a book where I don't find something interesting in pretty much every chapter. The word slut, not the book Wordslut, but the actual word slut, came from sluta, which means untidy one. People used to use that word to describe both sexes. What's a slut now? You see where I'm going with this? There are enough examples in this chapter that it can't just be a coincidence, but you wonder why it is. And it probably has to do with what I was saying earlier about how men had more to do with the development of the English language than women. People who use these words all the time, I'll bet that they're taking things a little bit more seriously than they like to admit. Obviously, if they're using the words seriously. Instructionally, I will add that the first step, in quotes, to reduce the harm caused by gender insults is simply to avoid using them abusively and to only use them in positive contexts. Chapter 2, wait. What does the word woman mean anyway? Plus other questions of sex, gender, and the language behind them. The most striking distinction in this chapter was easily the difference between sex and gender. I remember one time I was 15, maybe. I was looking on Facebook and I saw someone say that sex doesn't define its gender. I was like, really? Okay, well, I mean, newsflash to me. I wondered what the difference was. So I looked it up. Sex is biological. Gender is cultural and conceptual. If you don't believe this, look at like the 3 main dictionary sites or whatever and see for yourself. Now, explaining this culture or concept of gender to people who don't understand it at all, I don't really know how qualified I am to do that. But theorists in linguistics believe that language, according to the book, the way we speak as we grow up and the feedback we get from it, that is what brings gender to life. Other cultures like Indian and Native American contain fundamentally more than 2 genders. But in this chapter, you learn ways to make language more inclusive, like saying folks or people instead of guys or gals or girls. It's subtle and it may sound unnecessary to some people, but even if what we say doesn't change minds, what other people say to us just might. And she explains that more in the chapter as well. But chapter 3 is girl, you're right. How women talk to each other when dudes aren't around. I like how she consistently brings up the history of root words to explain, well, it wasn't always like this, like people think it was because ... You learn about hedging, something I do all the time in these videos without even thinking of it. Words like I feel like, or maybe, or just. For some time people thought that hedging is like a sign of like a woman's docile nature. It's really naturally about building trust and making a connection so that you're understood by the other person. I learned this sort of tool of communication from a fantastic communication book called Just Listen by Mark Golston. It's just like saying or yeah multiple times in a conversation while other people are talking, just so they know that you understand what they're saying and that the conversation feels more productive on both ends. I feel like communication is so much more complicated than people think it is. See, I just did it. The hedging, like I feel like, I totally just did that. And I do it all the time in these videos without even thinking about it. Chapter 4, women didn't ruin the English language, they like invented it. She has really long chapter names, like Malcolm Gladwell length chapter names. But the part with Bob Garfield talking about vocal fry, like who care? Why do people care so much about this stuff? Apparently young women use the lingual features they do, like vocal fry, as power tools for establishing and strengthening relationships. And a lot of people in a lot of cultures around the world do these, just like the vocal fry, known as like a creaky voice. I definitely don't think I'm as good at it as the author is in her narration, but also uptalk, when you talk like this when speaking a declarative sentence as if you're asking a question instead, which Australians have been doing forever. So it's not like a bunch of insecure girls from the Beverly Hills invented it like people think they did. Thankfully, she puts to rest anxieties around the concept of excessive usage of the word like as well. Like is useful as a way to not have to remember exactly what you said when telling a story, or as a filler word to not sound incompetent when explaining something. Chapter 5, how to embarrass the shit out of people who correct your grammar. I have to say, Montell went way more into other cultures than I thought she would regarding how they apply to what she's talking about. In this chapter, she discussed multiple things, but when she went over so many gender pronouns, the last time I heard this many different references to other cultures, it was easily like the culture map. Yeah, I went there. And by the way, every book I mentioned in this video, I have reviewed it, and I will drop a link to every one of those reviews in the description. But I like how she uses these references to justify the normalization of like feminist vocabulary. Let's just call this feminist vocabulary. Like gender neutral pronouns, they and them, by being like, well, this has been going on for centuries in like South America, Britain, Italy, Greece, Australia, Israel, etc. And here's how. So many things that people in America ridicule and are ridiculed for doing in terms of like this feminist vocabulary, they have been going on forever in so many different areas of the world. And I don't know why, but it really isn't much of a surprise to me that not everyone seems to know that. Logically speaking though, it's probably the most non-aggressive way to be like, oh yeah? Well, maybe we need to raise taxes on condoms. I don't know. Please forgive me for this very bad example. We're trying to cut back on them. She said in 20 years, it could be very normal to say, hi, I'm Sam, he, him, as a way to introduce yourself. After checking out this chapter, I I don't see a problem with that. A lot of the time before Wordslut, I thought, who cares? I care a little less than that now about just about anything in this book. Language changes are so normal and they have been going on for so long, and this is probably the main reason for what I was just saying. Chapter 6, How to Confuse a Catcaller.
And other ways to verbally smash the patriarchy.
Okay, I have a few questions and a little bit of a mini rant. She is saying in this book that catcalling is a means of men asserting control and power. What if, as a man, you don't feel the need to? Do you just have nothing to worry about? Like, what do you say to your fellow man when he is catcalling? I'm not asking for me. Don't worry about me, guys. I'm getting married in December, but before I met my fiance, I worked in construction. Some other guys there would catcall, and I found it to be the most unnecessary and obnoxious thing. Let me mansplain to some men here and say, shut the hell up. Go back to work, why don't you? Is that really the most productive use of your time? Like, what's the point? You think the most powerful men out there sit on the sidewalk catcalling in their spare time? I just don't get it. I don't. It's the level of primal that you'll see in a stupid dog peeing on a fire hydrant. Not a smart dog, but a stupid dog. Knock it off and channel your sexual energy elsewhere like a human being who cares about himself and others. Or does that require too much of your brain to understand? Did I miss the day in man school where they went over why and how to do this? So stupid. Shut up. Just shut up. Part of me wishes I did catcalling. At some point, just one point, for literally no reason other than to be able to actually make sense of why someone would. But it's so appalling and disgusting and idiotic and obnoxious and immature to me as a male that I just cannot even. And I cannot even say, oh, she's so wrong about this, because like I said, I wouldn't even know. And by the way, while we're at it, Auto Yes Person seemed like a total jackass and rant. She does address this kind of later in the chapter, but for anyone that doesn't apply to, which I'm guessing won't be a lot of you, the author said she was once able to confront quite a few guys in the past by saying, I know why you're doing this. You're trying to prove how straight you are to each other. I've studied people like you in school. You can't fool me. Chapter 7. It, an ode to cursing while female. I had no notes in this chapter, and I'm not sure why. I didn't dislike it, I just don't have any notes, and I'm not sure why. Chapter 8, Cackling Clinton and Sexy Scarjo. The struggle of being a woman in public. This is so much more than a feminist book. Obviously, it touches on both, but I'd actually go as far to say that it's more of a linguistics book than anything, and talking about theories behind why something like a woman's voice is considered attractive or unattractive by men, depending on what it sounds like. This is the type of thing you might hear from an evolutionary biologist like the brilliant David Buss. Chapter 9 is timed to make this book just a little bit gayer. This is probably my favorite chapter, but I'd say it's also the most unexpected, because you'd think that Wordslut applies enough to females or anyone who is or identifies as a woman that it's like, why is there a chapter about gay men's voices and dialects? My fiance can't tell you how much I complain that I don't have enough friends in the LGBT community. Shout out to all the queens out there watching this. Montell discusses things in this chapter such as code switching, where you speak more like someone from another culture in order to fit in more on your own, or lisps, and how they're not always entirely used like this, where the F sound is replaced by the th sound. Like, give myself a little round of applause for that. Straight white people don't need to stop saying yas queen, but if they're going to continue making use of this product of marginalized groups, at the very least they can support those communities in exchange. Can we all at least agree that, like, this is fair? Can we do that at least, please?
Okay, thanks.
Chapter 10, Cyclops, Panty Puppet, Bald-Headed Bastard, and 100+ other things to call your genitalia. I'm never gonna run into another book in my entire life, I'll bet you guys, that has a chapter with the same name as this one. This chapter took like a really deep dive into the implications of a list that this one guy put together with his research team of 2,600 different names for genitalia that came from thousands of documents and pieces of literature between now and the 13th century. It stood out that she addressed some advice from Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus by John Gray, which in retrospect was easily one of the worst books I've ever reviewed. Chapter 11, so in 1,000 years, will women rule the English language? I think the best part of this chapter is that she reminded us when language reform happens, it has to happen on board with cultural change. Making a language feminist doesn't start with making the vowels, consonants, or vocabulary feminist. It starts with changing the ideology of its speakers. In case I haven't mentioned, by the way, I haven't tried this, but I imagine it's not too easy. The author did a phenomenal job nailing down the specific origins of slang words like vajayjay and mansplaining. What I like about this book so much is, there are a lot of things, but the biggest slice of the pie is probably how unbiased it is. The author, I believe, was able to very well paint herself as nothing beyond just a friendly and helpful narrator. She tells us more of a series of stories than a series of opinions and political beliefs, which is, I imagine, incredibly rare in a book like this. I mean, I find it in books that have nothing to do with politics or religion at all. And she's like, well, these people believe X, these people believe Y. What we know for sure is Z, which I found really refreshing. By the way, for anyone wondering if they'll find this book offensive, please allow me to shine some light on Wordslut's offensiveness. This is just something that I couldn't imagine myself reviewing this book in full without throwing out there. Before buying it, I looked, and as of the uploading of this video, no other male reviewers on YouTube have bothered checking this out. As a straight white male, I didn't find this book offensive, and I find this important to mention for anyone who's on the fence and wondering, like, you know, is this book illuminating or is it just like pushing an agenda? Some books, guys, they will surprise you. You have to admit it. I've reviewed over 300 books on this channel, and I can't tell you how many books have floored me. I don't think you'll find Wordslut to be offensive unless you're like a middle-aged or elderly white man who can't really kind of get past his like personal like sense of masculinity. There are just like some parts where she kind of groups middle-aged and elderly white men together in general and stereotypes them in a way that I wouldn't say makes them look the best that they could. And that's really it. I mean, the most offensive part is when she identifies them as a given name by, I forget who, norms. Like, you know, even if the norms don't get you, linguists will. For example, if you're a middle-aged or elderly white man, however, and you can understand where she's coming from, you will not be offended. Believe me, if I were a middle-aged or elderly man, I would feel the same way. But quick direction one, who I recommend this book to, in order to help myself adapt to communicating with others in an ever-changing modern world, I'd make the effort to check it out anyway. Especially if you're a male. Born male, that is, quotes. Having someone accuse you of doing your gender badly often feels like the worst insult of all because it tells you that you failed at a fundamental part of who you are. This timeline contributes to the much believed lore that uptalk is another Valley Girl invention. So much credit given to such a small group of people. When a problem is more visible, it is often more discussed. Hitler wasn't any less fascist just because he could write a coherent sentence. Political correctness doesn't endanger our freedom of expression at all. The only thing it actually threatens is the notion that we can separate our word choices from our politics. I, for one, have been told several times that I curse like a man, and I can never tell whether this is a compliment or not. Predictions when it comes to the relationship between language and social change are notoriously hard to make. Direction 2. If you like this book, check out her other book, Cultish. You absolutely will not be disappointed. This was, again, the most feminist book I've ever reviewed, so I cannot tell you that it's close in terms of feminosity, which probably isn't a word, but if you're impressed and entertained by it, Montell's personal touch and intellectual prowess once again will not disappoint. Wordslut by Amanda Montell. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop new videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.